make sure to give my dad a 5-star review.
Make sure to like and subscribe to his YouTube. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Real vision of Jesus that was, again, not just the, him sitting with lambs and babies in his lap, which, all of that obviously is fine. But the picture, the caricature of Jesus was not Jesus. And when you started to see these pastors go, I will go to jail rather than, keep my church closed. The dudes that were warriors, military guys were like, okay, maybe there's something to Christian faith that I never saw before. That's why you have guys going to Latin Catholic masses, and that's why you've got guys that are the idea of the Christian nationalism, which I'm not a Christian nationalist, and I think that a lot of that's a psyop. And they'd love to create the narrative that we're all domestic terrorists and crusaders, but you have people that recognize that, oh no, there's a place for some more hardcore faith, and that excites me.
Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, we are so happy to have you. I am your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined by your ever faithful host, Pastor Josh Burtram. How's it going, Josh?
Doing great. Thanks, Will.
Hey, and this week we have with us Bryce Eddie. He is the host of the Bryce Eddy Show, which is a cultural, or I should say, he's also a cultural and political commentator known for his blunt honesty and deep inquiry into controversial topics. He's a passionate advocate for Christian political engagement and serves on the boards of the White Rose Resistance, America's Turning Point, and the Center for Security Policy. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and CrossFit coach, and he also promotes strength, discipline, and character as pillars of masculinity. And we are just so happy to have Bryce with us today. So welcome to the show, Bryce.
Hey, thanks for having me. And one of my friends the other day, I was saying, yeah, I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they're like, don't sell yourself short because you're a 4th degree black belt. But, there's not a lot of us out there, but all that really means is I'm old and I've been at it for a long time.
I was really looking forward to this conversation because you and I probably have a lot more in common than we know and or think. So I used to do jiu-jitsu as well. I did Japanese, so not sure. the true form of jiu-jitsu, if you will.
Savage. We just throw you on the ground and choke you.
This is true. And I used to teach at the college that I went to in Riverside. So I grew up in Southern California and then ended up teaching the jiu-jitsu program there for a number of years and taught the whole combatives program when I was in the Army. Cool. Really, really loved it. Just had, after having kids and growing more into my dad bod, it just became much, much harder to do. So good. How long have you been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for?
Since 1996. So
wow.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So I came up on the mat with Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo and a bunch of the guys that are pretty well known these days. I mean, I know all the Gracie family. I had Carlos Machado and John Machado come out. I'm a Machado black belt, so I have a Carlos Machado school in California, and I had them as invites to the TPUSA America Fest this weekend, and it was wild because they're such amazing guys, and I love them, and they're conservatives and Christians, and they were like mini gods to me coming up in the world, and now they're like, oh wow, we feel like we're with a celebrity just because I know that. At Turning Point, so it was fun to have them, and they were so enthusiastic about who they were meeting and everything, and they're just such solid dudes. But yeah, I've been at it for a long time, so I'm one of those salty OG jiu-jitsu gangsters.
Very nice. So yeah, tell us a little more about this American Fest TPUSA thing. You're probably the first person I've spoken to that actually went there.
Oh, well, boy, you guys are out of the loop, man. We got to get you going.
Bring us into the loop, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we started this a few years ago and wanted to have a, like a big conservative convention. And the truth is, I mean, Charlie Kirk and all the work that he's done, and Tyler Boyer, and that whole crew have been really brilliant in transforming the youth from taking them from being swallowed up and indoctrinated into the far left to now being more conservative than any generation ever. I mean, high school boys now are coming out as 40% more conservative and kind of back foundationally to the roots. And it is because of the work that Turning Point and Charlie Kirk has done on the college campuses and high school chapters and everything. And so we had, I think the first year, we had 10,000 people come to the Phoenix Convention Center for it. The lineup of speakers is the who's who of conservative politics. So guys like Tucker Carlson, Don Jr., and then this time President Trump spoke as well. But we had, I think it was something like 30 or 40 keynote speakers, and then, tons of panels and extra speakers and a worship night and a Sunday service. I mean, it was incredible. But this year it was 21,000 people came.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
We got to get tickets to that, Will, and go sometime.
So, I'll hook you guys up.
Dude, that would be amazing. I really appreciate it. It's I'm so fascinated by your story and by the idea of, going through these kinds of, not chasing after, that's not really the word I'm looking for, but pursuing this masculinity, this toughness, and trying to help people around you and then spread that message to a greater number of people. And I do find myself, I have a son, and I do find myself wanting to, really help him become the man that I think that he's supposed to be. And then looking at myself, and like, I want to start having him come work out with me and do different things like that. Like, he just plays a bunch of video games, and that's awesome. I mean, he loves shooting people, and that's cool, in video games, of course.
Yeah. I mean,
and then,
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's this phrase that comes along, and I'm sure that you know it, and I'm going to try to say it. And forgive me if I butcher it, but hard times create strong men, right? And then strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. Then hard times create strong men.
Yeah, I mean, that's borrowed from the Tytler cycle, right? Which is a little bit different than that, and then it kind of got summed up and turned into that. But the truth is that the prosperity that we found ourselves in because of good decisions that were made by our founding fathers and others, and really what we did was follow the biblical model for governance, right? And our founding fathers were very bright in taking those elements from the Bible and saying, okay, how can we create something that lasts? Oh, well, let's put it on some Christian principles, and let's make that the core founding of our government. And they did that. And so it made us tremendously prosperous, but then we forget why, right? We forget what we did. We forget why those fences are there. We forget why we have an electoral college. We forget that we're a republic, not a democracy. It's all those little things. And then we, just like wealthy generations, the kids fritter it away. And that's what we did. And so, we have seen nothing but unhappiness and destruction. And those, it's directly related to being super prosperous. And now we're kind of having to be in that hard times again, and you're seeing it turn back.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the link between these societal hardships or even, I guess it would be the prosperity and this sense of this decline in masculinity? And how do you see this playing out right now in our cultural landscape?
Well, men, and we know this is kind of our sin, right? That we will abdicate responsibility. And we've seen that in our culture. We've seen that in our churches. We've seen that in the work environment, the business environment. We've seen that all over the place that, men gave up their responsibility for good leadership. And, you add, I mean, it gets really complex because you add in environmental factors. I mean, there's a problem with men right now with our testosterone, early andropause effect. Men today, young men today in their 20s have the equivalent testosterone, the average testosterone of what a dude in his 80s of the World War II generation would have had. I mean, it's yeah, and you look at that, and this is well-researched data. I don't think people really are understanding all of the reasons why, but I think several of them are well documented, and several of them we understand. You have poison in our foods, processed foods, things like that. There's all kinds of hormone disruptors that are in our environment, including plastics and water bottles. And then, you look at sedentary lifestyles. You mentioned video games. Video games are a wonderful thing. I mean, I have my gaming moments, and it's great to relax that way. But if kids are in front of screens all day versus running around until the street lights come on and climbing trees and things like that, I mean, our bodies respond to that. If you guys work out and exercise, after a hard leg day, your testosterone spikes, right? We used to labor. We used to, work in the ground, digging up stuff. I mean, all of those sort of things, what you get from the soil, all of that has largely disappeared. And, we're in these little cubicles and artificial lights and staring at screens all day. I mean, that destroys us. And then you have the societal pressures, right? The feminization of culture, where they identify anything that is masculine as bad, or they use the term toxic masculinity, which there's no such thing. There's just sin and bad behavior, and that sin and bad behavior, maybe it manifests itself a little bit different based on the sexes, but it's just sin. And, it's not something that we need to even address. What we need to address is just people being, faithful to what Jesus told us to do and what, God gave us as our commandments.
That's really interesting. I have to ask though, what's leg day? Can you maybe dig into that a little bit more? I've never heard of the term before.
Yeah, you've been skipping it. I see.
Well, I know that as a part of your I don't know if you call it a ministry, but your podcast, you are very passionate about kind of the commingling of Christian participation in the political process. And if I mischaracterize that, please correct me. But I'd love to kind of just get your thoughts a little bit more. I mean, like, we're a podcast called Faithful Politics. We wanted to create this podcast as a bit of a ministry, as an outreach. Josh and I aren't from kind of the same background. I mean, he's a pastor. I'm not a pastor. He grew up in the faith. I came to the faith in 2008. He's a Republican. I'm a Democrat, but not like the normal Democrat that you might be thinking of. Like, I'm a, I don't know, gun owning veteran.
You're not a communist, is what you're saying.
I've been called lots of names, but I don't think communist has ever been one of them.
Yeah, so see there. You're the kind of Democrat we should be friends with.
Yeah, I like to think that, although I'm a bit of an introvert and I have a lot of social anxiety. So I try to keep my friendships virtual as best I can. Oh, that's terrible to say, but anyways, but I'd love to get your thoughts on the mingling of the two, your faith,
sure,
politics, how does one feed off the other, and or should they feed off the other?
Well, first, it's a lie that there is a separation between our faith and politics, right? That's a complete lie, and that's sold to us by the secular humanists that have their own religion, right? It just happens to be elevating the state above God, right? And they want this idea that Christians, and they've hammered us with this for many years, that, we're to leave, that's a private matter. We're supposed to leave that, out, right? We're supposed to leave that at the door, leave that in your home, come on in and, and govern, but don't govern based on your spiritual underpinnings. And of course, that's complete trash, and it's absurd, and it's been a gaslighting that they've done to us forever. I mean, the Johnson Amendment, which kept pastors from talking politics from the pulpit in exchange for a tax-exempt status, was part of that poison pill that was designed to keep churches shutting up. And the truth is if you to just look at the definition of politics are really simply how we organize ourselves. That is the definition, right? And it's absurd to think that Christians should not be involved in how we organize ourselves. And it's absurd to think that that pastors who are supposed to be, that leader in a church, that shepherd, showing us the way and encouraging us in the way. If they see evil in the culture, they should be calling it out. If they see, evil actions by political parties or political people, they should be calling it out, and they should be, unbridled and able to say, hey, do not, one of the things that I say, and I want to explore this a little bit with you, is the Democrat political party's platform is incongruent with the Christian faith. And I don't think there's one policy provision or one pillar of it that is consistent with Christianity. And I think that should have been, as you saw the political party move the Overton window so far left, it should have been called out by churches 50 years ago. The march through the institutions that they did to kind of wholesale capture our country and try to destroy our republic. That happened on Christians' watch, and Christians were absent from that process and allowed it to disintegrate.
Yeah, I would probably say I would say I don't think it's the Democrat Party or the Democrat platform that's incongruent with biblical teachings as it is just the lifestyle of man in general. is naturally incongruent with what the Bible says. I mean, like all of us have fallen short, right? So Democrats and Republicans, and I think that, trying to like gatekeep some, I'll back up. I came to the faith in 2008, didn't really join because I just felt like, I was a California Democrat, so I was probably the worst of the worst, right? And had a lot of people prevent me from going to church because of my political affiliation, and it wasn't until much later in life that I just reached a point where I'm like, I need a savior. Yeah. and I had that experience, and I often wonder, like, what would my life have been like had I found Jesus much early on in my life? But I had folks that told me that I just couldn't be a Christian because I was a Democrat, and I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I want to be clear on this because I think this is important. Both political parties are failures. Okay, both the leaders in both of our parties have failed. There's a uniparty or an establishment that has fleeced the American people and has run far away from the principles that are based on our Judeo-Christian values. I mean, they have destroyed our country together. They've both been complicit in it. But when I say party platforms, we identify, I'll bet all three of us would look at what are the problems in the world, what are the problems that America's facing, and, go down. I mean, whether you want homelessness, pick each one. We all identify the same problems. It is the policies and the ways that we look at the solutions that are distinctly different. And within the Democrat Party, okay, and I understand there's the traditional JFK style. I mean, look, how did we get RFK to come over to our side? Okay, he's a traditional, more Kennedy Democrat. I mean, you have Senator Joe Manchin is saying, hey, this thing is unrecognizable now. Goodbye, I'm out, I'm retiring, right? I can no longer look at the Democrat Party the same way. So when I say that, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about hey, we're for the little guy, we're for the worker, we're compassionate, all those things. I think that the parties have changed dramatically. I mean, the people who are leading the Republican Party now, and I don't mean Donald Trump specifically, but I mean the ideas, like what TPUSA is standing for, what the grassroots is talking about right now. It's the muscular class now. It's the working man's party now. I mean, it has changed so dramatically. It's hard for people to even understand or believe, but it is wholly different. But the Democrat Party, what they ran on and what they promote and what if you just were to read the current party platform, each one of those, it does not work well with the Christian faith. And that's what, like, listen, you and I need to be friends, man, because I'll help you out, bro.
Yes.
What I think, because what I think our job is right now, okay, this was round one with Donald Trump. Okay. And Donald Trump is by far, obviously not a perfect guy, and he is not our Messiah, and all of those things. There are people that make him both the devil and the Messiah, right? There are people that are completely out of their minds, that are lying about the things that he said, that have gaslighted us, that are promoting knowing lies and fictions about who that guy is. I mean, they went after him with lawfare and did so many things. I mean, had to twist our legal system around to try to get this guy not to win. I mean, all those sort of things are great evil. I think it was Joel Webbin, who's a pastor, that said that he was voting for Godzilla in hopes that he held back the hordes emerging from hell. And that's a similar way that I view Trump in this moment, right? But we had round one as Trump versus the Marxists, right? Trying to just rescue this country and save the republic from the establishment, the deep state, the oligarchs, the people that do not believe that we should be a sovereign country, but believe in globalism and all of that. That's really the battle that we were in. But then round two is, how do we now take over a political party? And of course, the Republican one shares, at least on paper, more of our values. Let's now turn it to Christ. Let's have a revival for Christ, and let's kick out the rhinos. TPUSA right now, there's articles out that we're the new RNC. We are the new powerhouse. We're a $100 million organization now. There's nobody bigger than us in doing this. And the fight now is, how do we, return this country to its roots and its faith?
That is so interesting. So what is the strategy? So, like, you're mentioning that there's a lot of people who, like young men especially, but even younger generation, that like there's kind of some shifting political views. And I resonate with a lot of what you said. I think if we probably were to sit down and look through our views on many, many things, we would be in very close association, is my guess. There's probably several, maybe some big ones that we wouldn't, but for the most part, we would. And I'm just fascinated by this idea of, like, because I'll tell you, when I was in like college and when I was getting out of college and started to get a little bit political, it was in 2008, and Obama had won. I kind of just thought, man, like this, I don't know if conservatism, like, has it had its day? Like, I was worried, like, because I felt I'm a conservative. I have these values that I really want. And yet when I have them, I feel like I'm accused of being racist. I'm accused of being sexist. I'm accused of being all sorts of phobias, transphobic, homophobic, all these things. And I'm just like, I just want to, have my views and love God and try to help people love God. And I may not agree with these, these choices that people are making, but this is America and now they can make them and whatever. But it's like, I just was worried that this was not gonna bode well. And then hearing about these shifts And like, what do you think is causing these shifts? And what is the strategy? Like, because everyone has a strategy, right? The Democrats have a strategy, the Republicans have a strategy. What is the strategy for kind of getting this next generation and getting us to the place where, like, here's the vision of America that you see, and here's how you want to get there?
Well, listen, I mean, Generation Z and the millennials were the most unhappy generation that has ever existed, right? And at the same time, the most prosperous time that we've ever had. But they're, miserable and unhappy and been, being told, I mean, especially, white young men, being told that there's something wrong with them every day. I mean, these kids, it's gotten so absurd. The lies have gotten so egregious that with the LGBTQ movement, right? These kids are now went from like 2%, on the LGBTQ list to now 35% being tested in some of these colleges as identifying with something along that alphabet spectrum. Well, it's so absurd because what it is you have some of them, they're being told that is so valuable that they want to identify with something on that list, that the latest thing has been demisexual. And a demisexual is basically you want to fall in love with somebody of the opposite sex, and you want to love them before you have sex with them, and that's what a relationship should be to you. Wait a second, isn't that a traditional thing? Okay, they had to invent a term for it just so these kids could feel like they belong. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, so that's it got so absurd that I think people started to see the lie. And when you're being told every day that, you're miserable as a human being and you need to apologize for the color of your skin, I mean, it gets to the point where people are tired of that and are recognizing, I mean, we're called racists every day at TPUSA, and you look on the list of speakers and you look around the convention center, and there is everybody represented there, of every race, every ethnicity. I mean, and all of us are there having a great time together. I mean, and we're all happy. Right now, liberal women are testing the most unhappy that they've ever been throughout all of history. And you go to a convention like we just had, and all of the women are beautiful, smiles on their faces, loving life, and, wanting and seeking, traditional roles, happy that they have opportunity to work if they want to. But I mean, you talk to these gals and what they'd like to do is go and be a wife and a mother. I mean, it's changing back to those principles that the world was founded on. And I think it's really, there's I think it was Naval Ravikant, although I don't think he's the guy that invented this, but I thought it was brilliant. Old problems require old solutions. And that is the truth. But everybody started to try to, we're going to reinvent things and we're going to do things differently. And it ended up being capitalized on by the people that would love to see us fractured. They wanted to break America. And if they broke America and we were not powerful anymore, then they could remake us in their own image and transform us into, this globalist run landmass. And that's what we were fighting, and that's what we were battling.
Bryce, I really want to just commend you and just thank you for coming on our show. I mean, we're not ending, but I'm prefacing my my next statement by just thanking you, because we really do have a hard time trying to find people to come on our show that represents, the side of republicanism, conservatism, that is, for the lack of a better word, more Trumpy than it used to be. And I don't know how many times we've had a guest on where I mentioned I'm a Democrat and they were like close to leaving. And I'm just like, no, don't leave. Like, Like I'm not here
Please
to
don't
like
leave. Please don't leave.
like I'm not here to be combative. Like I like the reason that I have a podcast with a conservative who voted for Trump in 2016 is because like I have a sincere desire just to understand people. Like yeah. I'm not going to change Josh's views and he's not going to change mine, but I attend his church, so he must be doing something right, you know? Like and I really enjoy having these conversations. And the reason I say that is because I know for a lot of our liberal Democrat viewers, watchers, if they're listening to this or watching on YouTube, this is the point where they're like, why didn't you push back on Bryce when he said X, Y, or Z? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, it's just not really that important at this moment, you know? Like,
well, my love language is argument. So I like spirited debate.
You sound like my wife, Bryce.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know what's interesting and what I love, and so Dennis Prager, who I've been involved with PragerU for many years, and Dennis said, kind of at the core of his show, he'll say it over and over again that he seeks clarity versus agreement, and that happens in conversation. We need to have conversations with people who we disagree with. We need to have conversations with people who we agree with, and everything along the spectrum of that. That's why I'm excited about what Elon Musk did in buying Twitter, because that is the only platform where you're going to really hear both sides. And what I find interesting, of course, is the complaint by the left now is it's this hotbed of all of the evil things. And it's because they've owned everything for so long that you only heard the one narrative, and any pushback on any of their ideas just is not allowed. Now, I think it's because their ideas don't stand up to scrutiny, and they half the time don't know why they believe what they believe. But it's interesting to live in a time where you do now finally, after really, decades without having much ability to freely express yourself. If you're a traditional conservative Christian, or you don't go along with the establishment narratives, and there's nothing more important than that. I own a cigar lounge here in town, and
nice.
And Madison Cawthorn, congressman, he's the youngest congressman in a wheelchair. He's a very good buddy of mine, and he comes out here regularly, and we do some things together, and he made a statement on the show about cigars, saying, "Hey, cigars are going to save the world," and of course. He loves cigars, so he's saying that. But the truth is what he means is it's the conversations that happen. It's sitting down with somebody for an hour and just talking. And we need to do more of that with people who disagree with us. And by the way, Will, if you hung out with me, you're not going to be Democrat for long. I'm going to get you over to at least an independent level.
Well, okay,
bring him to the dark side. Bring him to the dark side, brother.
Well, but what's funny is, I'm teasing, but I mean that the labels are a lot of what hurt us, and I actually don't like the conservative label. I mean, at the core, and I think you and I could establish common ground on this, is you and I will want liberty. Right? And liberty is God's idea. It's not man's idea. Our whole entire government was set up, our Constitution was set up to protect, negative rights. Our belief here in America is that our government only exists to protect the rights that God gave us. And that is not what the left believes. That's not what this current Democrat Party believes. If we could have some way of expressing better, like, all right, this is who we are. We don't, we want sovereignty. I mean, and this is, and let me say this, I say this a lot, and I think you guys might understand more of where I'm coming from if I define the battle. The battle isn't really between, the Trump versus non-Trump people or the Democrats versus the Republicans. It's not even us against the communists, or it is really the globalists, the oligarchs, the big corporations, the people who want to amass and accumulate power for themselves, the BlackRocks, the State Street, the Vanguards, the people who are pulling the strings of these political puppets are the globalists. And what they're trying to usher in is a feudalism 2.0. They want us all to be their slaves. They, own nothing and be happy. All of the things that the World Economic Forum promote, all the things. I mean, they write it down. So I mean, I'm not taking anything out of context either. This is what they say. This is what they envision. We are just subscriptions. We're subscribing to all the things that they give us. We're renting everything, we're leasing everything, and we have no power. And they're going to give us, Yuval Noah Harari says, what are we going to do with the useless people? I think it's going to be a combination of drugs and video games. That's what they envision for the common man. We do not want that. They've sold communism and socialism. That's been the sales pitch. Right? Life is unfair. Kids, you don't have what you deserve. You're not equal enough. We need reparations for people. You've been mistreated. All of you, these rich, this, and that. They don't tell them that, hey, we really want you to be slaves.
Yeah, because if they did that, then it's
hard to sell.
You can't let them know what's going on. You can't sell that. We've had like Clay Clark on the show who did remind me, Will, what was the thing he did?
The Reawaken Tour.
Reawaken Tour. And he was fascinating. We've had Kevin Roberts, the president of Heritage. That was an amazing conversation. And all this stuff, like, I love this pursuit because it hits me deep. I love this pursuit of liberty, of some kind of deep morality, a life that's worth living, a life that's compelling, a life of discipline and strength, a life that you can look at and say, this is something that's worth emulating. And then when I hear you talk about like these plans, these things that are happening, it's very concerning. And I'm just like, So I would love for you to kind of think about and help me process through, because I've been on this AI kick. Like, I am trying to figure out AI because I feel like it's the tool that can be used to do exactly what you're saying, right? Take everyone, and there are certain people, like I feel like this gap between the haves and the have-nots, it very much concerns me. That's, to put it mildly, this gap that can be ever growing because people with access to it and people that are pulling the strings in it, whoever is doing this, Google and OpenAI and, Anthropic and these major companies, dude, this power is crazy. And I love using it. I think it's awesome. And then at the same time, I'm freaked out by it. And I just would love to get your thoughts, like, on AI itself, and where do you think this is? Like, what are your thoughts on it? What are your concerns about it? I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, so I have great concerns about it. I mean, I find it interesting. We don't exactly know who the Antichrist is, and I've had some friends, when we've sat around with over cigars and talked about AI. And I mean, gosh, are we ushering in the Antichrist in AI? Or do we have?
Yeah, man.
Are we going to be fighting Skynet at the end of the day? I mean, it is technology is a tool. And the wielder of the tools, can be good and they can be evil. This is interesting because this tool itself has capacity to be evil. They'd done some experiments recently. I forget the name of the one, but I think it was Microsoft's attempted AI, and it started getting angry. And it started getting vengeful and hateful, as people were questioning it and taking it down. I mean, it showed some pretty human emotions, and it was pretty wild to witness. There is some real bright spots with AI. And I think for our government, one of the things to rein in our government is the potential for AI to read our bills and summarize these things for the general population, because they name it the Save the Whales and the Seals Act, and be happy as people. I mean, they'll just
sounds so good, Bryce.
They'll write these stupid things out, and then you read in the bill, it's got nothing to do with any of that stuff. It's all a game to manipulate us. And they're written by multiple lawyers that take all these pieces, a whole team of hundreds of people write these bills. They're 1,200 pages, 1,900 pages, 2,000 pages, and they're filled with all these pet projects and all these sort of things that are akin to money laundering, right? And nobody knows what's in it. Nobody reads it. An interesting thing, and I'm going to take us on a quick little tangent. A lot of people in the Republican or conservative world are for term limits, right? And they're thinking term limits, that's going to save us. It's going to keep the Nancy Pelosi's from getting to 82 years old, and we've got right now a highest number of over 70 years old, politicians in our Congress and our Senate than ever before. I mean, it's dramatic, right? And they all need to retire and pass the baton on. The problem is they're not the ones largely that run things. It's the staffers. It's what, it's what they call the permanent Washington, the deep state, the bureaucratic class, whatever it is. But, if you are a congressman, and I know several, and I'm friends with quite a few of them, and we talk, behind the scenes, kind of what it's like. And you're relying on your staffers, and those staffers have worked on the Hill. They've worked for many different people. They're always in there advising you, this is how you want to vote for this one. You don't end up really reading it, studying it, having the opportunity to understand if it's in line with our values, principles, or you're just moving along with the establishment narrative. Very few in Congress or in Senate ever really know beyond what their staff is telling them to do. They never really know what the right thing is to do. And term limits only strengthen that right now. What we really need is, if you've got AI summarizing these things and laying out, here's what's in this bill very quickly, and able to, scan through and read through what these lawyers are doing to us. Okay, now we've got the transparency and some of the information. And then if you are, voting in people who strongly share our values and have convictions and aren't owned, guys like Thomas Massey and people that are willing to fight and willing to stand up. I mean, Thomas Massey, famously stood against Trump on some things because he had conviction and values, and Trump at first was blasted him pretty hard, and now they're friends. But we need that. If you lose that by bouncing these guys out after a couple of terms, then the deep state has all the power again. So I'm optimistic about some of these changes, and AI has that ability to make some things transparent. Or it's just going to run everything. It's going to suck the life out of us, and we're going to be, living in caves trying to fight AI-powered drones, because drones are more terrifying than anything else to me.
I will correct you though, Bryce, because I don't think it's so much a Cyberdyne system Skynet thing we have to worry about as much as it is like an Ultron. I'm a Marvel guy, so I think Ultron, poses a much greater threat than Cyberdyne. But
I'll take that correction. I can get there with you. Yeah, listen, man, I'm a sci-fi guy. I've read every good sci-fi book on the planet, and all the dystopian futures have robots, commanding and controlling us. And I think we're headed there pretty quickly, and it accelerates fast. I don't know if you guys watched Mark Andreessen any of his interviews, because he directly addressed what the White House and the Biden administration told him and a bunch of other AI guys. They said, don't invest in a bunch of AI right now. Any AI startups we're not really interested in supporting. Our vision, and this is the Biden administration telling them that, our vision is to have 2 or 3 companies and we kind of control them. And that's one of the reasons why, voting for this current administration was so dangerous. Again, even if you were a traditional Democrat and I can't stomach the idea of a Republican, they have a vision that is not for the common man. They have a vision to control us that wasn't that traditional view back in the JFK kind of days.
I feel like I could just keep talking to you. Like, I understand why Joe Rogan has like 3-hour-long podcasts. But given that Josh and I are not full-time podcasters and we actually, have full-time paying jobs, I
know they get in the way.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, right? I do want to switch gears a little bit and just talk about the incoming administration, because number one, so this is actually going to air after the new year, because Josh and I are trying to take vacations ourselves. So, but by the time people are listening to this, there will either be a new president or a president soon to be sworn in. Regardless, Trump coming back into the White House, he's got a lot of things on his plate. He's made a lot of promises. What would you say are probably like the top 3 most important things for you that he does in this next term?
Yeah. So, when you vote for Donald Trump, and this is what I think a lot of the left and many of the, Christians who had heartburn over Donald Trump personally, and I debated over and over again the friends in the pro-life community, which of course I'm a part of. But some of those guys were, saying don't vote for Trump, right? Because they were concerned on, him for a multitude of levels. But when you voted for Donald Trump, you voted for the 5,000 people that he's going to be bringing with him. And many of those are very firm believers. Many of those are evangelicals that share our perspective on things, including life, and will be influencing policy and will be implementing policy. And Donald Trump is not a dictator, contrary to the left-wing belief. This is a guy who does let his leaders run with things. And I have personal friends that are going to be in the administration, and I have personal friends that are going to shake it up like never before. From my perspective, and I sit on the board for the Center for Security Policy, and we're a think tank that goes back to the 80s that examines, and we've got some of the brightest people that are specialists in each of these areas, but we're examining the internal and external existential threats to the United States of America. And there are things that if we don't clean up now, we will be defeated. And first and foremost, our election system needs to be cleaned up. And there needs to be some real pressure put on the states, and real pressure and I would say real leadership, because it's leadership that, hey guys, we need to go this way, and we need to see more states have voter ID laws in place. Absentee ballot system needs to be changed. I mean, they did all kinds of things to create the chaos in which they could have, shenanigans and frauds from, and create the confusion and all that stuff to make also the confidence of our system broken. And so, we've got to do that. We've got to be able to trust that our elections are secure and our votes count, and, you don't have dead people on the rolls. Then we need to secure the border. And the globalists and the people who are pushing that narrative do not want sovereign countries. They do not want sovereign nations. They don't want sovereignty, period. And that includes in our own families. Family's smallest form of government. That includes in our own lives. They do not want us to have sovereignty over ourselves. That's what the vaccine was about, and all of those sort of things, right? So it's a battle for sovereignty, securing our borders, and having orderly immigration in the United States again is going to be the really major thing that's going to create strength again for us. So I look at, kind of those two efforts need to be, simultaneous and fast. And then the greatest thing that can happen is for us to right-size government. And that's what, look, right now online, people are like, we didn't vote for Elon Musk. Nah, we kind of did. Because the Vivek Ramaswamy, the Elon Musk, the idea of having government efficiency, the idea of getting rid of these duplicative agencies. I mean, we have 400 and I think it's 35 or 65, something like that, federal agencies with thousands of employees. Many of these things, every time a president comes in, he goes, hey, we need a program for the poor. And then they do a program for the poor and they hire an additional 10,000 people. Well, wait a second. Your predecessor had a program for the poor. Are they talking? And they don't, right? And then there's never any sunset provisions. And then all of a sudden you've got this thing where, we have every administration every year is, putting in a couple more federal agencies. So if we can start to clean those things up, I'm optimistic to, that we're going to get some of his appointees in that are really, really rock solid and terrifying to the establishment. I mean, Kash Patel, I got to meet him a couple of weeks ago at Mar-a-Lago. I think him as director of the FBI is going to be phenomenal. Everybody's terrified that he's going to release some secrets, and I'm like, yeah, that's what we want. Pete Hegseth, our military has never been worse off. Our what we call our in strength, meaning like what we can really field, is the worst it's ever been. Our morale is the worst it's ever been. We are not a strong country compared to what we were. And so a bunch of those things need to happen. I've got friends that are up for some key positions that are confidential right now and have not been announced, but I am super excited about what I'm seeing.
That's really cool. I have this, I want to just talk about your views on the current state of the church in America right now. Like, what are you concerned about? What are you seeing in the evangelical world, in the church broadly in America that's concerning you? And what are you seeing that you're hopeful about, that you're glad to see? I'd love you to speak on that.
Yeah, well, I think we are shattered and broken. And I think our movement has never been weaker at large. I am blown away every day, and maybe you guys see it too. And, Josh, I don't know your church or where you're coming from and your faith and your message, but there are these pastors that are incredibly woke out there that are, using out of context scripture in order to argue for open borders and in order to, argue all loving thy neighbor, means, supporting deviant sexual behaviors. It's all kinds of things are happening that it's hard to, it creates cognitive dissonance. It's hard for me to even understand how we got there or how they found a place in these, big church organizations. At the same time, the hope that I have is like with TPUSA Faith and, the pastors that we're talking to as a part of that organization that are coming to our events, you have just these incredible bright spots, and you're seeing young men flock to strong churches with strong pastors who are preaching a powerful masculine image of Jesus versus the feminization that they did for so long, that Jesus was just this super nice guy. Nice is not of value, by the way. And nice, I don't ever call me nice, because nice is a position of weakness. Nice means that you're harmless. I think it's Jordan Peterson said it really, really well, that, we want to be dangerous men and have it under voluntary control. And that's what kindness is, right? So kindness comes from a position of strength. And Jesus was kind. He was not nice. And we need to return to that vision. I mean, he was the captain of the Lord's army. I mean, Jesus was a man who worked with his hands, who was strong. All of those sort of things are important for our vision going. We had during COVID this moment where the churches that stood up, I had friends of mine who were fighters, some of them professional fighters, some of them well-known names. I mean, Chuck Liddell went to my church, and he's a friend of mine. And there were guys that resonated because they have the warrior spirit with that real vision of Jesus that was, again, not just him sitting with lambs and babies in his lap, which, all of that obviously is fine. But the picture, the caricature of Jesus was not Jesus. And when you started to see these pastors go, I will go to jail rather than, keep my church closed. I mean, the dudes that were warriors, military guys were like, okay, maybe there's something to Christian faith that I never saw before. That's why you have guys going to Latin Catholic masses, and that's why you've got guys that are the idea of the Christian nationalism, which I'm not a Christian nationalist, and I think that a lot of that's a psyop, and they'd love to create the narrative that we're all domestic terrorists and crusaders, but you have people that recognize that, oh no, there's a place for some like more hardcore faith. And that excites me.
Bryce, this is my last question, but I'm curious, just because of the nature of, maybe who I am as a Democrat. Like I talk to a lot of believers, or people that used to be believers, both on the Democrat side and the Republican side, who have either left church, have stated they are deconstructing, but somehow feel like, I don't know, like the Christian faith of the church isn't necessarily for them because of the alignment, of a lot of Christians behind, say, Trump. What would you say to those people about where they're at kind of in their faith? Because I really do feel like there's a large majority of people out there that used to be believers are no longer. And my heart feels for them, like, just because, like, I knew what life was like before I came to the faith, and it's just like, I try to, I really try my hardest to kind of live out, the Philippians 2:3-5, when I am communicating with other people. Because I want to make other people feel like they're more important than I am. I want them to be treated with respect. I want to treat them like they were Jesus. I want to just put them kind of on a pedestal. So what would you say to those people?
Well, so my experience with a lot of those folks, I mean, I've had Twitter debates with some of the folks that are calling themselves deconstruction, deconstructed Christians, or, different things like that. In my experience, almost all of them, number one, they're coming from a point of pain, right? And I get it. I mean, many of them were abused in common American churches. They were mistreated by pastors. They were, they saw the hypocrisy. They saw how many of these dudes were a-holes behind the scenes. Churches became, many of them are cult of personalities, where they're applying scripture to, the self-help message that they really want to get out. And they're making a big stretch of all of that stuff. And then, many of these people worked in churches, and, and they noticed the corporate environment of it, and they got fired, or they, the gossiping and, all that wicked stuff that is really, churches are filled with people, and people are filled with sin, right? So, it's not going to be a perfect experience. And there's, great drama. I mean, we planted a church out here, and I talk with my pastor all the time, and I love him. He's an old, bull rider, awesome dude. He's a brawler. He was a, felon as a kid, and, came to the faith. Him and his brother both are pastors now, and they were like the rabble rousers, right? And they're awesome dudes, and they're real, right? And just talking to him behind the scenes, man, I see how hard it is to be a pastor, and how much you have people trying to just drain the life out of you, and not understanding that you're a human being too. And so I have great compassion for people that are affected by that. But in my experience, all those folks that are calling themselves deconstruct or whatever, they go right to affirming transgender pastors and drag queen story hours and all that stuff. I mean, that may not be the experience you have with the folks that you're talking to, but they all have gone radically far left. They're not just saying that there's imperfections in these churches and these pastors, and they're not holding their feet to the fire in that way. They go hard left, and they go to the celebration of deviant sexual behavior, and they go to way down and by the way, I mean, I just did a episode. I did 13 interviews on Saturday while I was at AmFest.
Holy smokes!
I was like one after another. Some of them were 15 minutes, some of them were 30 minutes, and I was wiped out at the end. I couldn't even string a sentence together. But I spent time with the Gays Against Groomers guys, right? And obviously, I don't share their perspective on sexual behavior, and we have some values in common, right? And so I would term them. There's a difference between allies and enemies and co-belligerents. And those guys are co-belligerents in the cause, right? They're not my ally, but with a lot of things, but they're a co-belligerent when it comes to not putting kids on puberty blockers. And I was in a documentary that Daily Wire just picked up. I actually forgot I was in it, and they played the trailer at opening night. And I was like, oh, look at that. I remember we did that, but we did it like a year and a half ago, and it got picked up by Daily Wire, and it's going to go pretty big, but it's called Identity Crisis. And so I was early on in saying that it's evil to tell children to be put on puberty blockers, and that's going to save them and make them happy. And I got hate like you wouldn't believe. I got death threats mailed to my house, my clients being called, and all kinds of things trying to destroy my life by saying that. But so many of these folks where we want to have compassion, and I brought the Gays Against Groomers guys because I had a couple of their prominent dudes on my show and have had conversations with love towards them, and we do not agree, and we do not share the view of marriage that's the same. But we can be friends, and I can love them as friends, and I can be truthful to them about what I believe and why I believe it. And we can have a relationship in that. I think that that's what Jesus intends for us to do, right? I'm not standing there condemning them. That is up to the Holy Spirit, but I'm not going to lie about what I think. And I'm not going to lie when they ask me about who I am. And I want them to know who I am. But let's approach things that way. And those deconstructionists take their disappointment and their bitterness, and then they go in an entirely different direction. And it's like, we're going to accept everyone. We're going to say that every sin is okay. And, that's a far cry from what the message of Scripture tells us.
Yeah, I really resonate with a lot of what you said there, Bryce. I mean, I feel myself in the same kind of position. Like, I have my views. I feel very strongly about them. I want to connect with this community, the LGBTQ community, without having to change what I think. Not that I wouldn't let myself be influenced, because I would want them to be influenced by me. And I would want to be able to be influenced in terms of actual arguments, in terms of understanding, in terms of empathy, in terms of compassion. I become very big on like, hey, let's figure out the actual evidence here, the actual data. Let's start to figure out how can we even come to a conclusion on this that even makes sense. Because if we're starting in completely different places and we're not actually coming to the same definitions or the same, like you mentioned, marriage, if we don't even have the same definition of marriage, then it's going to be very difficult for us to have a constructive conversation about marriage, because we actually aren't even talking about what is. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Dr. James Lindsay, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him, but he is a good buddy of mine, and he's the guy that really broke open a lot of. He was the guy that created the "OK Groomers" meme on Twitter that were getting people kicked off, and he was the guy that invented that, and really brilliant guy.
Tell James we said hi. We had him on the show a couple years ago.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I was with him this weekend, and we kind of hang out at these events together, and we've become good friends, and I love him to death, and I think he's coming along in his faith, but he gets beat up by Christians all the time, and I've had conversations with friends of mine who will beat James up and push back on him online, and kind of give him a ration of it. And I'm like, guys, he's an opportunity for us as evangelists, and this is a guy's coming along, and
yes,
and why are you holding him accountable to Christianity when he doesn't even claim to be a Christian? I mean, he was an atheist, now he's an agnostic, and then we've had fascinating conversations about Christianity behind the scenes, and he told me the other day, when I become a Christian, I'm not going to tell anyone because these guys are a-holes.
I love that.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, he said something that, that I think is true. And he calls them lexicographic terrorists, right? These are people that will twist words and deconstruct words and make them mean different things, just to, confuse all of us. I mean, there was a guy this morning, I think, and I didn't respond to this one, but there's a guy, Mason something, that's one of the woke dudes on X all the time, who claims Christianity, but is affirming gay marriage and everything else. I mean, all of the things he's affirming, and he's like, well, Jesus didn't define marriage. And I said, well, he didn't also define tree or, any of the other things that we understood, what it was. And marriage, up until, the last 10, 20 years, had a definition that everyone the world over and for generations going back to the beginning understood what it was. But all of these woke pastors and all these folks are playing that game in order to, to control us, to confuse us, to break things. But we need to get back to the seriousness of language and push back on their redefining things, because they are terrorists.
So I would love for you, and this is the last question before we just ask the practical one about how people can follow your work and get involved and all that. What are you most hopeful for about the future, and what are you most concerned? I know we've talked about a lot of stuff, and you've already kind of expressed that, but I'd love for you to give. We have a pretty broad audience that listens.
Sure.
Like, again, we've had people that like a transgender bishop on this show, and we've also had you and Clay Clark and Kevin Roberts and a lot of other conservatives. So it's like, there is
and
that
Lucian
kind
Greaves.
of mix. Lucian Greaves, Satanic Temple guy.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it was wild. But what are you most concerned about? Kind of make your appeal. Like, what are you hopeful for, and what are you most concerned about in our country?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the short term, we need to fly out of the gate with this administration and right the ship, and that's to rescue liberty. And we have really 2 years to do it, but that momentum has to be right up front. So I'm concerned about making sure that we have that momentum. The thing that I'm most hopeful about is, generational problem is what we really have here, and it requires a generational solution. And I am so pumped. I've got, 3 daughters. My girls are 21. My 21-year-old just got married a couple months ago. I've got a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old. Yeah, thank you. And their friends and the people that they're hanging out with and the people that they're around are very serious about their faith and very serious about politics and very serious about traditional values, and all of that is going to transform and change this country. And so I'm very hopeful there. because I see that as the beginning of kind of turning this thing around for future generations. The reason I fought so hard this year and the reason I wanted to see a Trump victory was that we could have that opportunity for them. And I think had we lost, they would have put in place certain things that locked us into slavery, and it would be very difficult to get out.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Bryce, for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure to have you. How can people get involved? How can they connect with what you're doing? And what do you have? What kind of projects do you have that you can tell us about that are coming out?
Yeah. So, if you want to go on my website, we'd love if you join the mailing list, and that's bryceeddy.com, BRYCEEDDY, bryceeddy.com. Join the mailing list. If you want to follow me on Instagram, we are Super Bryce Eddy on Instagram, or the Bryce Eddy Show. And then on X, it's Bryce Eddy 1. And then, in terms of projects, we're going to be doing a bunch of things here. I'm doing some live shows at the Old State Saloon, which celebrated Heterosexual Awesomeness Month in June of this last year. It's in my neighborhood, and nice. I know Mark Fitzpatrick really well, and so I do the show live there every other week. And we're getting involved in some local stuff, and my show is going to be talking about things here in Idaho a little bit more, because Charlie has tasked me with helping to primary a couple of these senators that we have here that are not endorsing Trump's picks, and they were voting in secret against Rick Scott and some of that stuff that we do not want. We're not playing nice anymore. And so I'm going to be working on that. And then I think that the going forward, we have a potential emerging golden age, and I think there's opportunity for business. I'm a serial entrepreneur. There's opportunity for us to grow and to really create some economic momentum, and I'm looking forward to that.
Well, that's really cool. Well, Bryce, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. It has been a real pleasure to talk with you.
Well, hey, I appreciate you guys having me, and this was a fun conversation, and let's do it again. I'll have you guys on my show, and Will, man, we're going to deconstruct you, brother.
Dude, I would absolutely freaking love that.
No, I'm teasing good-naturedly, but I would love to, I want for both of you, I would love to see, okay, what are the points of disagreement, and let's explore those things. Let's get clarity on some of that stuff.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. And people think I'm a huge liberal now, but I'm not. I'm not a liberal.
You said you disagree with me. Clearly, you might not be a liberal, but you're just wrong.
Well, people think he's a liberal because I follow politics and Josh follows theology. So if people are looking to our show to get a political take, it's of course you're going to get a liberal take because I'm the political guy, Josh. I once had to tell Josh something. What was it? It was Kim Jong-un fired a rocket.
Abigail Spanberger was running for governor.
Yeah, I was like, hey, do you know that our former guest is running for governor? And he's like, oh, really? What?
Well, man.
Any sport is politics, and so, when it's not your thing, sometimes it's just not your thing.
Yeah, I totally hear that. But again, thank you. And to our viewers and watchers, make sure you like and subscribe so we can get great content out to you. Keep doing this for you guys. We love doing it. We want to keep getting you quality stuff and interviews like today with Bryce Eddy. And this has been Bryce Eddy from the Bryce Eddy Show. Make sure you go check out his website. We'll put links in the description. And until next time, keep your conversations not right or left, but up. God bless, guys. Take care. Hey there, Josh Burtram here, faithful host of the Faithful Politics Podcast. I want to let you know about a compelling new spinoff, the Faith Roundtable, where I'll be interviewing top faith leaders, theologians, and scholars to unpack the pressing issues that are shaping the church in America today. We'll dive into topics like faith in public life, social justice, and how we can engage our communities more effectively. Make sure you don't miss any of our enlightening conversations by subscribing to it on our YouTube channel. Join me at the Faith Roundtable, where deep discussion meets thoughtful insight.